Welcome, panelists. We are already streaming live to our Facebook, so we are going to get started shortly. We want to make sure that all of our panelists are here for the bi-monthly plans meeting. So thank you for your patience. We'll be starting just as soon as everyone else arrives. All right, I think we are just about ready to get started here. So I want to take a moment to welcome everyone to the Hill CDC's bi-monthly plans meeting. We have a packed agenda. My name is Marimba Malians, President and CEO of the Hill CDC. And just a couple of points for those who are attending. Please, if you're interested in joining the meeting, we ask that you just raise your hand and we will either unmute you and or invite you to chat in the chat box within the Zoom if you're joining via Zoom. If you are joining on Facebook, we will try our best to get to all of your questions there as well. But we are going to get started because we have a packed agenda. I'd like to kind of run through the agenda really quickly just so that everyone has an opportunity to know what is on today's agenda. So I'm going to share our screen and get started. Alrighty, so here are the items that we have on today's agenda. Next slide, please. I'd like to, thank some of our other team members who are joining us, but you all know that Hill CDC is a place-based organization. We're focused on the revitalization of the Hill District neighborhood. We do the bi-monthly plans meetings because there are so many things happening in the neighborhood, and oftentimes it's very difficult to keep up with all of the moving planning efforts that are happening within the neighborhood. So we offer this as one consolidated place where residents and stakeholders can get apprised of what's happening. So we are going to have Rebecca Rinala from the Mayor's Office is going to talk briefly about the RAISE grant and also Ammon. She's going to give a quick update on those two items. We are going to have the Lower Hill Curtain Call relocation by Penguins. We will have Craig Dunham from the Pittsburgh Penguins and Walter Hood as a part of that presentation. We have Alexis Narodsky from the Housing Authority to talk a little bit about the Choice Grant and Plan, which is really exciting. The Hill District Parks Plan will be provided an update from Marty Battistone, excuse me, I'm sorry about that. We have, I believe Harvey Butts is going to join us this evening for Freedom Corner. I'm going to do a quick update at the end on the Center Avenue Activation Plan and the final report that is forthcoming, which is super exciting because so many of you participated in it. A reminder for those of you who don't know, the Hill CDC is focused on people, place, and policy. We are specifically charged with ensuring that the Hill District is developed in a way that aligns with the master plan for the neighborhood. And we work in partnership with residents, stakeholders, and others to promote and implement strategies and programs to connect plans, policies, and people to compel and drive compelling community development opportunities. Next slide. We do our work in really three distinct buckets: real estate development, economic development programs, and policy and planning. This particular meeting falls under our policy and planning efforts, but you'll hear other components of our work that intersect with these three areas. All right, we're going to hand this over to Rebecca for an update from the RAISE, from the Mayor's Office on the RAISE grant, and then that'll be followed by just a quick update on Ammon.
Thank you, Marimba. Good evening, everyone. So glad to be here. Thank you for having me. As Marimba shared, I'm going to give some quick updates about two projects we're very excited about. Starting with RAISE, which is really a project of projects. This is a massive infrastructure investment that's going to be coming to the Hill District via an $11 million grant that I know that many of you were involved in advocating for from the federal government. And it's basically for infrastructure. So you name it: streetscapes, city steps, corridors, intersections. This is going to be a huge revitalization project that we're very excited about that's coming to the Hill. And so as part of preparing for this project, because it is federal dollars, there is a lot of bureaucracy involved, and what our DOMI department, which is the Department of Mobility and Infrastructure, is busy with right now is going through the actual execution of the agreement. So this is going through all the paperwork with the federal government about, scope of work, deliverables, all that kind of stuff. They expect to be done executing that agreement by the end of the year, so that come January in the new year, we're ready to start actually sharing procurement opportunities associated with this investment. Hiring consultants, hiring the people who are going to be partnering with the city to actually deliver these services and this work. Which brings me to the next part of my update. If you could actually, Marimba, if you don't mind going back to that previous slide. We're fortunate to have the assistance of the Hill CDC in helping us do a procurement related event earlier this month in the Hill to try to make sure we're doing our part to get the word out about all these opportunities that local contractors and local professional services contractors can be a part of. So design, architecture, civil engineering, you name it. I'm sure I'm forgetting a bunch of different trades that are going to have an opportunity to bid on this work, but we want to make sure that we're being really intentional about having those opportunities come to businesses in your community, to companies that look like the residents of your community. So these pictures that you all have here are from the event where we brought PennDOT in. PennDOT is actually the fiduciary that the money for this grant is going through. And there is quite a process to becoming a PennDOT approved vendor. So these pictures are from an event where we brought PennDOT and their team out to try to walk some of these businesses through what that process looks like, so that once those bids go live on PennDOT's system, our local companies are ready to apply for those opportunities. So if you want more information about that, we can connect you to PennDOT's team to help you go through that process. I think now that's everything on Raise. Thank you.
Rebecca, can you just walk attendees through how they can get in touch and with whom they should get in touch if they're interested?
Sure. So Chuck Dorham, who I think is in he's not in one of these pictures, but Chuck is my colleague here in the mayor's office. He leads our Office of Business Diversity. Actually, Upasna from his team is in that picture on the top left with me. They lead the work for the city in making sure that all the contracting opportunities that come through the city include diverse, women, LGBT, Black, veteran-owned businesses in the communities where we're doing this work. So I will put, or I guess if you all could put, do I have the ability to put it in the chat? Here we go. I will put Chuck's information in the chat so you all can reach out to him if you or anyone you know is interested in going through that process with PennDOT to be eligible to bid on some of this work. It's chuck.dorham@pittsburghpa.gov.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for asking. And I should say, I think, yeah, I just have a note from the team here that really just emphasizing that it can be quite a lengthy process. So encouraging businesses who have not started this, like, to start now, because it can take a couple of months to get approved. And we want to make sure folks are approved and ready to go in January. Any other questions on that? Okay. And I should say, early win, PennDOT did let us know recently that after that engagement that we partnered with the Hill CDC and PennDOT on earlier this month, they already have had an uptick in applications in the system. So we're excited and we want to keep that momentum going. Switching gears now to talk a little bit about a park that I know is very near and dear to many of you, Ammon Park. So we held a community engagement in partnership with the Department of Public Works, City Planning, the Hill District RCOs, Macedonia Church, a really great group of people that worked with us to do an engagement earlier this month. At Macedonia, we had over 100 people turn out to start talking about what a vision for the future of Ammon Park can look like. We officially have a funding commitment in place from the Pittsburgh Penguins, who I believe are on this call and can answer any specific questions about that, to help supplement the city's capital investment in this work in the park. And so building on the work you all have invested in the Greater Hill District Parks Master Plan, which my colleague Marty is going to talk about in a little while, we are now talking to the community about specific design goals and vision for the park, the outside specifically, not the inside of the recreation center. So I'm going to drop, we're still taking input on that. We've already gotten a lot of it, which is really exciting. We've had kind of vision boards up at the rec center for the last few months, and we're actually getting comments there from kids and people who actually use that space on what they want to see the outside look like in future years. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop a link to our Engage PGH page, project page, which is where we have a live survey where you can take the survey. Please share the link with your neighbors, your friends, anyone who uses that park. We want to hear from them on what they think its next chapter should look like. And this is really fun work. This is where you get to talk about, do you want baseball, football, basketball? What kind of play spaces do you want? What kind of stormwater infrastructure do you want to see in the park? Really kind of the sky's the limit on what we can be thinking about and dreaming about. And then DPW will take that input and create usually 2 to 3 draft concepts about, okay, we've heard everyone's ideas. Here's what we think is actually feasible given our codes and our safety, standards, and the budget we have based on the input you all shared with us. And then we do a couple more iterations of public feedback on those draft design concepts before we finally land on a final design and then move into construction. So you're looking at a couple years of a process in total, but I actually have to pull up the Engage page to remind me. Marty, do you remember when we're projecting to be done with this? Here, wait, I have it up. I apologize that I don't remember this. I have so many projects on my docket right now. I will tell you there's a presentation on the Engage page that has all the information about the projected timeline, but I think we're looking to be under construction and finishing up in 2025. I hope that's right. I'll get you guys the answer before the end of the meeting. Any questions on that?
That sounds great. Thank you for the update. Any questions from the audience on this particular topic, on either Ammon or on the RAISE grant? We will make sure to share those links out, Rebecca, for both the RAISE grant as well as Ammon. And thank you for joining us to give us those critical updates.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Alrighty, take care. Next, we are going to have Craig Dunham, and I believe that we have Walter Hood here to talk a little bit about curtain call. I'm going to walk through some specific points. Most of you who follow the Hill CDC, next slide. Most of you who follow the Hill CDC know that we have been advocating for a community meeting to discuss the proposed relocation of the curtain call from in front of the PPG Paints Arena to Crawford and Wiley. There was a meeting held last week on that subject exactly. And so Tuesday of last week at St. Benedict the Moor Church, community members gathered with the Penns as well as Hood Design Studio to discuss the proposed relocation. This meeting is a part of the Lower Hill Block E commitments that were made by the Pittsburgh Penguins to ensure that everyone was on the same page relative to the proposed location. At the meeting, we had a robust conversation with the Penguins, talking about everything from the start of construction to funding status for the site, to ownership of the site, to community involvement, as well as what should actually be on the site relative to the narrative versus picture. So there was a robust discussion. We will be capturing those comments and working with the co-conveners for that meeting, which was the Hill District Consensus Group and the Shelby Heights Collaborative, as well as the Hill CDC. Together, we will consolidate those comments that we heard at the meeting and provide those to the Penguins and the elected officials, as well as the rest of the community. So tonight, we wanted to take an opportunity to have the Pens and Hood Design Studio to present again the technical issues that were faced at the last meeting. May have been an obstruction for some to fully engage and understand what was being proposed. So we want to invite them, and they graciously agreed to do so. So I am going to hand this over to Craig Dunham from the Pittsburgh Penguins to present their slides.
Great. Can folks hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Marimba, for the introduction. And yeah, it was a great meeting last Tuesday, but hampered by some significant technical challenges. So we're happy to be here tonight to keep the discussion going and share information about this important project. Next slide, please. Just sort of excuse me, to introduce some of the parties involved in realizing this on the Lower Hill. The site that we're proposing is on land owned by the Urban Redevelopment Authority on the Melody Tent site. Pittsburgh Arena Real Estate Redevelopment is the entity created to advance projects under the option agreement with the authorities. We are the applicant in this case. Once the land is improved, it becomes part of the open space system network assembly of properties and is owned by what we call the Lower Hill District Conservancy, which is an owners association. Due to the funding couple of the funding requirements that we're working with, the funders have asked that the artwork itself be owned by the Sports and Exhibition Authority as a condition of their funding. Hood Design, led by Walter Hood, is the artist. We've engaged La Quattro Bonsi, Pittsburgh-based firm, to work with us on the site design, landscape design. Cosmo Technology is the civil engineer and stormwater designer. And Hood is intending to work with Techniques Architectural Products as the fabricator. They're a wonderful firm based in Wilkinsburg. And then eventually we'll go out to bid and select a contractor for the site improvements. The project goes back to roughly 2009, when the new arena, now PPG Paints Arena, was in planning and design. A consultant was engaged by the Penguins and the SCA and the URA to make some recommendations about public art for the arena. And they provided a report in January of 2009. And one of the sites that they identified, I think there were 3 of them, they called Garden Passageway. And it's basically an exterior area in between the Epiphany Church and the to-be constructed arena. It runs from a plaza that is off of Center Avenue down to a landscape area that is at Washington Place near the 5th Avenue corner entrance into the arena. Shortly thereafter, a request for qualifications was issued to a number of artists. And next slide, please. A community committee, including the Penguins and the Sports and Exhibition Authority and others, was convened, and ultimately Hood Design was selected. They presented a project which they called Curtain Call in April of 2009 for this garden passage location located next to the new arena. And I'll certainly let Walter talk about that work and then the proposed relocation. Next slide, please. So meanwhile, the master plan efforts and the Lower Hill development efforts advance. And what's up on the screen is a master plan that was prepared and approved in 2014. And it shows the plan of streets and blocks for the former Civic Arena site, including the Melody Tent site. And it shows the concept of a CAP park, a constructed park bridging I-579 between Washington Place and Chatham Square. So this begins the planning and ultimately the development work for the Lower Hill site. And you can see the location of planned open spaces and plazas on the what was then the Console Arena site as part of this plan. Next slide. Since 2014, as many of you are aware, the CAP project was constructed at Frankie Pace Park, opened in 2021. The streets that are shown on this plan, Wiley, Fullerton, and Logan, have been constructed. We're underway with construction of the FNB Financial Center, and we began presenting with the input of Gensler Associates planning team. And prior to that, BIG, the Ark Ingalls Group planning team, some reconfiguration of the open space from 2014 that reorganizes it around the streets that were constructed. And basically the idea is build no more streets. We found them to be very steep if we continued to build streets in the kind of east-west direction, and that we could organize the site around a network of open spaces that created accessible pathways following the Frankie Pace Park all the way up to Crawford, and from Crawford down to Frankie Pace Park, and a variety of spaces that would be created within and around the buildings on the blocks. Eventually, this master plan was approved in January of this year as an amendment to the land development plan. So this is what we're now working with. In 2019, the CAP Park, the Frankie Pace Park, was well underway, and the Sports and Exhibition Authority had previously reached out to Hood Design to see if there was it would be a consideration of relocating the site. We also reached out to see if there would be a consideration of relocating the artwork into this network of open spaces that we were created. And that happened roughly in 2019. The parties before that, the URA, the SCA, the Penguins, the philanthropic community, had been making efforts to fundraise for the original project. It really wasn't, I don't know, getting traction. It wasn't happening. We were faced with still a very sizable gap in funding. And in 2019, the Penguins proposed through the development vehicle PAR to explore advancing it as a component of the redevelopment. And so we made the commitment to fund and to explore with Walter ideas and possibility of relocation. Next slide, please. Another image that helps situate what we're proposing. This is our kind of development program, giving a sense of scale and building types. We're proposing a location that's up at Wiley and Crawford, and it would eventually be adjacent to a residential building that's planned for that block that is the Melody Tent site between Wiley and Center Avenue. Next slide, please. Here's an aerial view of that location today. It really runs from the corner of Wiley and Crawford down about midway on the block, and it is about 90 feet deep. And then this would be the first phase of open space, and then later a second phase that would run all the way from the bottom of this down to Fullerton Street would be completed along with future residential development. But this gives you an idea of sort of the placement, the size of it, and how it relates to the streets that are currently constructed and the parking lots on Melody Tent site. Next slide, please. So let me hand it over to Walter. He can talk about the design, the process, the artwork, the inspiration, and then we'll talk. We'll take questions. Thank you all.
Thanks a lot, Craig. Can you hear me? My voice hopefully is clear.
Yep.
Craig gave a pretty exhaustive sort of background on the project. I would just add, when we won the competition, this was not an RFP, it was a competition. I think there were 2 other teams that were invited. We came to Pittsburgh and made a presentation at the convention center. The Garden Passage, the prompt for the project was that it was a landscape and an art project. The landscape component of that project was scoped to basically clean storm water from the upper plaza, and the water would have to go through a set of bioswales, and that was part of the landscape component for the original competition. The other piece was an art piece that commemorated in some way the Hill district that had been redeveloped on the side. Our scheme we called Curtain Call was inspired by the 10 Cycles of August Wilson. And the idea was that we wanted people who had lived in the community to have a curtain call, to come back out and make themselves present. And through that, we offered that we would ask anyone who had lived in the Hill, currently or in the past, to basically come to a series of outdoor cookouts in the Hill and bring photographs. And the idea was we would take those photographs and make curtains. And that gives you Curtain Call. It was 3 terraces that came down from a stair. Again, the original site was not accessible. It was too steep. There was no ramp condition. There was one accessible site that we made from the bottom. So we allowed there to be complete accessibility from the bottom plaza, but to get to the other 2 gardens, you would literally have to go through a stair. Over time, we literally worked through and got, I think, all the way to 50% CD drawings. We had it cost. We were ready to go to construction, and that's when the funding failed. And that's, again, was 2009, 10, 11. Craig mentioned that by 2014, there was a master plan. We thought the project had pretty much died and was not going to get built. Of course, you can imagine it's 15 years now. But we were called by, I think the Penguins called us, was the first call, and asked if the project could actually be moved to the CAP, because the CAP was the first project out of the package. We basically said we would have to start from scratch because our scheme was based on a slope, and everything was based on sloping. So we couldn't take that original design and apply it to the CAP. Again, months passed by that, and then Craig called and said there were some other sites based on the master plan. And we literally took our site and our design, scale versus section, and we looked at the proposed sites that he suggested, and we found that the site at Wiley and Crawford was pretty close to what we were actually doing in the lower part. But we also thought that it was a better site because it sits higher and it actually creates a gateway to the community once you come to the development. And since then, we have worked on the August Wilson House and worked on the green print. So there were other things that we were trying to connect. When we got the site, once we placed it, we were happy to continue because Craig and his team and the Penguins, everyone was optimistic about the funding. So we came back on board and we remade our project for this site. We still have 3 gardens. The gardens are cleaning stormwater, but they're also these giant curtains that we've collected, I think now close to 3,000 images. We have access to the Teenie Harris collection at Carnegie, and we're open to having another call now since we have a new site that we would add more images. Next image. To give you a sense of how this new site works, again, we're at Crawford and Wiley. There is a plaza space there where there is seating, and there is a larger extent for gathering where you can actually seat down through all 3 gardens. We decided, since we had an opportunity to have this really steep slope, we decided to have the first curtain be small, the second curtain to be medium, and the last curtain to be large. That way we can actually continue the elevation, but when you're at the top, it really creates a space. Hopefully when the building comes in on the left-hand side, it will actually create a wall condition where you would actually have a contained space. Next. Again, this was some of our collecting. That's Terry Baltimore, who we are hoping can continue working with us to collect some of the images. Here we noted who gave the images, and we counted the images, and we have them all digital. When we have the meetings, we scan the images as well. As I said, we're hoping that we could have another future call for images, and we would come and we would capture those images through whatever the technology needs today, whether it's a scanner or a photograph. Next. And here was the idea. The idea was you would come to the space, and like a quilt, there would just be a kaleidoscope of images. Again, there is no narrative, but this is really about a visual kind of sense. And when you're in the space, you're prompted, there's music that will play. And the music are based on rain songs, R&B songs, like I Can't Stand the Rain, A Rainy Night in Georgia, you know, those kinds of things. So that there's a relationship between the landscape component and the art component. Next. And these are some of the images that we've collected so far. You can see the Tina Harris archive is primarily black and white. Some residents did give us black and white, but we also have color. And we like the idea that we have both. Now, the 15 years since our initial proposal, the technology for actually printing on glass and how you could actually make a glass wall has changed to our, I guess, our delight, that we're able now to actually print the images directly on the glass and protect them, where before we were printing on plastic and sandwiching in between. Next. This gives you a sense of that layering. You'll be able to see through the images. So right now you're looking at images that don't have the translucency, but you'll actually be able to see through, and we can work on the opacity, how much you actually see through. So safety issues are not a concern because it's literally like a building wall, a glass wall of a building. Next. And this is the simple kind of construction as I talked about. There's a single panel, a double panel, and a triple panel. And the pieces are not large pieces. They're made up of a triangular, a square, and a rectilinear piece. And that's how we're able to scale the different pieces. We're thinking that at the lower part of the wall, that we have the opportunity to actually have smaller images, or we can make images as large as we want to. And I think that's the beauty of this design, is that we can actually choreograph each curtain. Next. And this kind of gives you a sense. We have the audio, we actually have the way that is being held together through the curtains, and we have these 3 switchbacks that you go through. In each one of the rooms, there's benches to sit, there's planting, there's lighting, and there's audio. Next. So if you think of previous to the art project, this was just a ramp that took you up the hill, which is pretty arduous. I've made this walk multiple times even today. But by having the artwork, we actually find that we have a destination now. And so we actually change the cadence. When you get to the artwork, the movement is much more sinuous. And as you arrive to it, it's faster. So imagine if you're walking up a ramp, it's fast. And then when you get to the artwork, it slows down. Next. And here you can kind of see the access points, the various gathering areas, the pavilion, and the gardens. This will be a garden from the bottom all the way up from Fullerton, all the way up to Crawford. You'll feel like you're in a single space, but the artwork will actually be at the upper. And you should be able to see the artwork from the bottom as you're making your way up. Next. And here's a closer view of those spaces. And you can kind of see in the curve, that's where we place the seating. Next. And then this gives you a sense, like cutting through down the street, you can kind of see how steep the site is. The upper part is less steep, the bottom part is real steep. So we're able to actually create a comfortable set of slopes when you're at the curtain itself. And here you can kind of see curtain area B, people standing there, the height of the wall, 12 to 18 feet, the rain garden. There are theatrical lights, so it will have a presence. Again, it will not be dark. It will almost be like there's a building lining the edge of the street. Next. And this gives you a sense of the stormwater, what we're able to capture, again, off of the upper part of Wiley into the plaza. The blue shows you where we're actually collecting and cleaning the water. So that component is still in flux. Next. And here an aerial view looking, again, you don't see a building to the right, but you can imagine once the building goes up, it begins to frame that edge. And as you're walking down the street, you can actually come into each room at the center of each circle. So you actually come in, break through each one of the facades of glass. Next. And then these are just some views. If you're walking along the edge, not wanting to go to each one, they actually create a foil to the street. Next. And then we see it at nighttime lit up, again, providing a really powerful, dramatic, landscape. Next. And then when you get close up, again, having the ability to sit and look at the kaleidoscope of images of people who have lived and are living in the Hill District. Next. Questions and comments? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. That was an extensive presentation. We do invite people to ask questions or make comments at this time. I want to refresh us on the items that came up at the meeting to give voice to some of the community comments and questions already. I mentioned them at the beginning, but now that people have seen the presentation, they may be a bit more equipped to hear what the concerns or questions were. So I think the first thing was that, and then I've expressed this to the Penns multiple times, that we are happy to have the presentation coming back before the community. We do regret that it was after the proposed relocation. But with all that said, we are where we are with the current proposal to move the site to Center and Wiley, but I think to Crawford and Wiley, excuse me. But I think the point is that, in the future, we really want to be engaged earlier in the process before such decisions are made, because they really are important to the broader community. One of the issues that came up was really about narrative. And Mr. Hood mentioned that the site is envisioned to be more visual and to also have audio. But I know that was one of the topics that came up was about narrative, and that there is such a powerful and important narrative to be shared, that incorporating narrative into the visual aesthetic would be not just meaningful, but appropriate, given the impact that this development, the history of this site has had and will have on the Hill District community. So I'd like to get a reflection on that particular point, because with the audio challenges we had at the last meeting, I'm not sure that we understood whether or not that was something that you all were going to move forward on, or waiting for more feedback from the community, which is our next step.
Yeah, I can comment on that. As I said, the piece was in the competition. It was two-pronged, and what we're interested in the relationship of landscape, music, and image. I think the idea of a narrative, is something that we're open to working with the community to figure out what's the best way to have narrative. I know in a lot of our art pieces, we tend to shy away from telling people what they're looking at because it kills the kind of experience. But I do think there needs to be somewhere a narrative about where you are in the Hill, right? I mean, just like the narrative for the prompt for the competition basically spelled out why you're having a project. And to me, a narrative of the Lower Hill is really needed in this place, because I think in the future, people won't know. And so we're open with figuring that out. I think one of the better places for it could be at the plaza, at the upper part. So while you're sitting there taking things in and having this purview, maybe there is a very clear narrative that people then can have an understanding of where they are in this time and place. So we're definitely open to that, and there's lots of ways in which we could do it.
Okay, thank you for answering that.
No problem.
Another one of the comments that came up pretty repeatedly was around site ownership. And Craig walked through what the existing site ownership is, and I'd like for you to go through that for this listening audience. And then we can kind of reflect back on any questions that come up from that.
Sure, happy to do that again. And this goes back to really the way that the Lower Hill is being developed in the roles and responsibilities between the public and the private developers. We have an obligation to create public open space, and that comes from the zoning. And each project is carrying a proportionate obligation to develop open space. There's some of that being built right now as part of the FNB Tower project. So we have the responsibility of creating it. Couple of different things could happen. It could be transferred upon completion to the city and become part of the city park system. And at the time, the city was not amenable to assuming new open space, new parks. It could be transferred back or retained by either the URA or the Sports and Exhibition Authority. They weren't interested in taking on new maintenance obligations, and so we said, okay, we'll figure out a way to not only construct it because we have to, but maintain it. And we looked at a couple of different models like a bid, but we settled on what is essentially an owners association, where the property owners around the open space make an annual, there's an annual budget established, and there's an assessment where they make a contribution to the maintenance of the open space. And that maintenance could be as simple as, landscaping maintenance, snow removal, and it could become more complex, like when we get an aggregate of spaces that we can host events in, maybe the association takes on a programming role. But it came to us first with the obligation to create it, and then there were various discussions about, well, who's going to own it and maintain it? And we settled on a solution where it was privately owned through an assessment structure, but it's still very much public open space for public benefit and public access. And that's the intent, and that's what we have every reason to be creating here.
Okay, we're going to go back. We have a couple more questions. Craig, when you say that's what we settled on, who are you referring to? Who settled on the ownership structure?
That was part of the early option agreement discussions. So it's a city discussion and the two authorities and the PAR as the Penguin Development Entity.
So for the listening audience, that would be the City of Pittsburgh, the Sports and Exhibition Authority, and the Urban Redevelopment Authority, and PAR is the Penguins redevelopment arm. So,
right.
So I think it is worth noting that the ownership conversation is one that there was no participation directly from the Hill District community in that conversation. And we obviously aren't going to vet all of that now. As I mentioned, if you're interested in participating in this conversation, please see the consensus group, the Hill CDC or Shenley Heights Collaborative, who are collectively working together on this issue. And I also want to recognize Terry Baltimore and the leadership she demonstrated at then Hill House Association, working very closely with Hood Design Studio to collect the images and so forth. And she has been invited and is involved to this day. So we want to kind of just recognize her work and her efforts. So the ownership question is one that the community discussed a little bit around, should it be owned by community? Shouldn't it be? How should the community be represented if it is not owned by community on a given owners association? And that's something that I think will probably need additional thinking and discussion, at least from the community's perspective.
Mhm.
One of the issues that, Craig, you know, that I've personally been really concerned about is public safety. This is an issue that I brought up relative to Block G4 on the lower hill, as well as all of the surrounding green space at the lower part of the hill, which is now privately owned, but a public right of way, but it will be policed privately and publicly. And it sounds to me that we're probably going to be in the same kind of situation relative to this site. And we know that sometimes over-policing is a real issue in communities like the Hill District, particularly around new development, when you have a poor and or working class community that is adjacent to new development. And so, so want to give you an opportunity to respond to that on the record, and know that that's an ongoing serious concern.
Sure. We're just about a year away from being operational with the first open space. And so the management team is just now beginning to put together the plans for all of the various contracts and services. And probably, you know, within the next month or two, they'll have a pretty good idea about how we're going to do this year one in the open space that's being created as part of FNB Tower project. And I think that'd be a great time to talk about how it's being set up and get some feedback and on the approach. So.
Okay, so we'll mark that as one of the follow-up items as well. For those of you who are not familiar with the volume of open space on this site, it is a considerable amount, particularly at the foot of the site, that connects the Middle Hill District to downtown. And so walking through that site, whether it be the curtain call or the foot of the lower hill, is a considerable amount of terrain to traverse on foot, creating some level of vulnerability for anyone who is navigating in that direction, should there be issues with private security or otherwise. And so, so I want to you know, put a pin in that one for now, but know that that is something that we will be following up on. Question on funding. Where are we on funding? When will the project be funded and constructed?
So I'll take the timeline question first. We submitted a final land development plan in March. And as you mentioned at your introduction, we put a pause on that. This, like any other portion of the lower hill, has to go before Planning Commission. Open space, public art programs go before Planning Commission. And then we have to submit a takedown notice to the URA and SEA under the option agreement. So my hope is that we can reboot the final land development plan process in the coming month. I've got a few portions of funding that I'm still working through with funders. And once I get those settled to the point where I can identify them in the takedown notice, we will file the takedown notice and move through the authority approvals process. Personally, I'd love to see this project be able to enter into a fabrication agreement with Hood and Techniques by the end of the year. And I'd love to be in a position that we are breaking ground when the weather breaks in the spring. That's the goal. And we've still got a few pieces to pull together. Some of it is dependent on advancing open space projects, and some of it is private and public funding. So it's a mixture.
Okay, so what I think I heard was that ideally you'd be breaking ground in the spring. You're still doing some fundraising. How long is the actual construction timeline?
I think it's going to be a season, so spring to winter. You know, if we can get landscaping done in the fall before winter, that would be the goal. The fabrication of the artwork takes some time, so I want to get that underway. The site work itself is complicated and needs to be done well, but it isn't going to take as long as it's going to take to fabricate the artwork.
Okay. Well, I think that that makes it even more important to, follow up on the discussion relative to narrative, because that would impact the installation and the printing of the art, the fabrication of the artwork. So we'll make sure that there's prompt follow-up there. Let's see if there were other items here. One of the comments that was, I think, noteworthy by a Hill District resident at the meeting, or maybe during the tour, for those of you who are not aware, we did some tours last week as well, was that the prior site was intended to intentionally draw attention and to intentionally maybe require the passerbyers to pay attention to those who live here. I just want to give that voice, because I think that it's easily looked over or underestimated, how that the relocation is purely through the lens of, kind of like, site terrain or constructability. We know anything is constructible with the right budget, but I think that it's worth having conversation about that particular comment, because I think that that is where some of the frustration around the relocation without community engagement really sits, in that domain of wanting to be respected in your own neighborhood and not wanting to be displaced or erased from a more uncomfortable location, is probably how I would describe it.
Yep. I'll take that, Craig. This is Walter again. I think that's a good observation, but in hindsight, now that we have a chance to look at both sites, the first site, the passerbys were going to be primarily people going to Penguins games, right? That's, people would literally be at the plaza and make their way down. So it wasn't for, like, I don't think everyday folk moving through would probably go down through that. And I think looking at the new site now, I do think you're probably going to get a more diverse group of people who will see the curtain, because you're going to have new retail, housing, and it's along a major street and it's not tucked behind a church. So I do think, in hindsight now, looking at the new site, we're actually in a better place visually. And I think I'm hoping we'll have a better impact on how people actually see this new development, actually, because there will be something that will contain something of the past as part of that. So I actually think it's a better location, because we were always worried about being sandwiched behind the church, right? There was some dead visual areas that the old site presented, where you literally couldn't see, all the way. You would have to be at the top and the bottom. And I think here we actually have to be able to view the site 360 all the way around.
Great, thank you for that explanation. And I think that is, important for folks to know, but I think, the Hill District has kind of embraced an ethos of art as an act of resistance, right, to social injustice, to economic injustice, and to those types of things that have had longstanding adverse impacts on the livability and social mobility of the community. And so I just want to make sure that we appreciate that it was, for some, intended to be viewed by those who would never come into the Hill District, right? Those who would rather not even see the residents of the Hill District when they're going into the stadium. And even if they park in the neighborhood, or even if they, need to utilize the neighborhood for something as a thoroughfare. And so I think that is, I want to give that voice, because I think that really rests in our shared understanding around the proposal. So with that, are there any more questions or comments? Questions from the audience, comments from the presenters or panelists?
And I just want to thank you for inviting us to give a chance to present this again. And again, for those listening, there will be an announcement of another call where we'll be asking to collect more images. And so hopefully people can come out and share those with us.
Okay.
And there'll be other
Thanks.
opportunities through the planning and board authority actions for comment and input on this as well.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. We have a question from Kimberly Ellis. Let's see if it's typed in here. She may need to be unmuted.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yep.
we can.
Okay, good evening, everybody. So I've been listening to the presentation and the commentary. And, first of all, for those who don't know me, I'm Kimberly Ellis, and I'm a historian and an artist. I'm also August Wilson's niece, and thank you so much, Walter, for talking about the history there. Um, you know, I'm not sure where the disconnect happened, but I think it may have been when Travis was the representative of the Penguins, because I do distinctly recall being at meetings where when the Mario Lemieux statue went up, like Hill residents didn't want to compete with like the Mario Lemieux statue, and also just kind of seeing the grassy knoll and the way that it sloped down. The initial idea of curtain call, not just as an act of resistance, but yes, that's one aspect of it, but also as a celebration of our own community, for us to see ourselves and to also celebrate ourselves. Um, it was sort of dampened by the Mario Lemieux statue. And so I know that Hill residents expressed their concern, and the conversation about moving the location was discussed. And there were Hill residents that definitely wanted it to be moved. Now, where it was going to be moved, there was no conclusion, but there was definitely an expression of not wanting it along the grassy knoll anymore and finding it kind of awkward. And then finally, I just want to say that I think that Curtain Call is in the best place. It's really awesome. I mean, I have to remind everybody on the call, this is on Wiley Avenue. This is our Wiley Avenue days. And this is not just for people who are not from the Hill. This is also for people in the Hill. This is a celebration of our neighborhood. And it is for people who are coming from the Hill, walking down Wiley and wanting to go through the right-of-way passage and going all the way down and going through Frankie Pace Park. People really like to do that. And they're doing it now on the bus. And then they're also walking through Frankie Pace Park. So it's for Hill residents coming from the Hill, and also for Hill residents and everybody else who are coming up the Hill, who are coming from work, or they're coming back home and they're living in the residential area. It's a true pride of place. And I'm really proud of this new location. And I think it's much, much better. And quite frankly, I had a personal experience in 2020 during the George Floyd marches, when somebody, the guy from Shaler set the police car on fire. And the irony is, I found myself having to run down that grassy knoll. And I was joking with my friends about it because I remembered that that's where Curtain Call was initially supposed to be. And I was thinking, I'm so glad, Curtain Call is not here. So I do think that the new location is a great place. And that while we do want art as resistance, the art is for us as well. And we want to celebrate ourselves and see ourselves. And I just want to remind everybody that the Curtain Call is not the only piece of art that's going to reflect community in the neighborhood. The open space is filled with culturally relevant art. And there's other ideas and other spaces, including the incubator space, including what's going to happen in the garage. I mean, Curtain Call will not stand alone. So I just want to remind everybody of all of those things. Thanks so much.
Thank you. All righty. So with that, we are going to close out this portion of the conversation. We will be in touch with the Pens and Hood Design Studio. Really quickly, the developer on this is Zipar.
Correct.
Okay, we will be in touch with you all as promised at the last meeting. So thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
And we got the recording from last week to everybody today too, so we can listen to that.
Excellent. We'll be sure to get that up.
Good luck. Thank you.
Or we'll be sure to get this one up with additional context. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so we want to invite Alexis Narodsky to give an update on the HACP Choice Plan and Grant. Alexis?
Thank you. So my name is Alexis Narodsky. I work for the Housing Authority of the City of Pittsburgh. I believe my colleague JW Kim, Director of Planning and Development, might join, but I'll just kind of run through the updates. So if you go to the next slide, please. We were awarded $50 million in funding from HUD. So we're really excited. Obviously, bit of a whirlwind right now, but $50 million to transform not only Bedford dwellings, but also throughout the Hill District. And if you could go to the next slide. So I just wanted to give everybody really an update on the housing. Choice has 3 components: housing, people, neighborhood. We're still ramping up neighborhood and people, so we will let everybody know once we have a little bit more information on that, especially from the people side. They're starting to ramp up hiring people because we have to provide case management services within 60 days of the award. But for those of you who may not know, overall, the Bedford Dwellings redevelopment has 411 units currently. We will have 823 total units, 411, which will be replacement for the current residents at Bedford Dwellings. And then the additional units will be 25% market rate and 25% additional affordable. So this is phase 1 is technically City's Edge. This is located in Uptown. If you could just go back really quickly. Construction has started. You might have seen some site mobilization. We closed this one in May of 2023, and there are 42 replacement units for residents at Bedford Dwellings. And this has been approved by DRP, and many of you may be familiar with this project. If you go to the next slide. So phase 2 is Reed Roberts. So that is with our co-developer Truck Development Group. This is 123 units, 90 of which will be replacement units for residents at Bedford Dwellings. This is another off-site project, and it is hopefully closing in November of this year. You may actually see construction earlier on the site, but that's like our target right now. And this also has been through the DRP process. It's located close to the Salem's Market. And if you could go to the next slide. And then we actually are starting pre-development on phase 3, which will be on Francis Street. So this is vacant land that the Housing Authority owns right next to the current site at Bedford Dwellings. There used to be public housing on this site. We just had a large resident meeting, and we plan to submit to DRP in 2 days on September 1st. So we're working on getting that package together. This is a really large phase. There's 180 units of housing planned. We wanted to make a large phase because we want to try to have a lot of replacement units. So this is 103 replacement units for residents. It has a senior building, a family building, and townhomes as well. And it'll be funded by a 9% low-income housing tax credit and 2 4% low-income housing tax credits. And that's actually all that we had for the update. If anybody has any questions, let me know. It's been a long time coming, and we'll keep coming back, and lots of meetings for sure.
Thank you, Alexis. We are so excited, and we know we've still got some work cut out for us ahead relative to the people, place, and housing work that needs to be fulfilled as a part of Choice. But I do want to thank you for your hard work. Been a true soldier getting this project over the line, as well as a number of other partners, including members of the URA team and other staff members of HACP, and an assortment of community members who have endured this process for years now. I know the OCDC has been involved for, I believe, over 7 years at this stage. Yeah. And so thank you for your work, and we are looking forward to seeing that the new housing and the other benefits coming to the Hill District community.
Mhm.
Have a good one. All right, Marty from the Parks Department is here from the City Parks Department to provide an update on the Hill District Parks Master Plan, design review and recommendations from the City of Pittsburgh Planning Department.
Hi, thanks all. I'll make it pretty quick. I know there's, more important things that we've gotten into tonight, but yeah, just reminding everyone that the Parks Master Plan was finalized. And this is just looping back to what Rebecca said about the Hill District Parks Plan was finalized and identified recommendations for each park in the Hill District and sort of prioritize those, with the first priority being Kennard. And so because the funding for Ammon has come up thanks to the Penguins, that will also be moving forward faster than expected. But in terms of the city commitment, Kennard is next up. And so if you want to go to the next slide. Is it me? Can I do it?
Moving forward now.
Oh, I can do it. Great. Wait, no, I can't. So this is what is proposed conceptually for Kennard Park. So moving over and regrading and totally renovating the football fields is definitely priority number one. And then making a lot of improvements to the rest of the park, both accessibility to and through the site and amenities for all ages. So having an actual splash pad instead of just, a broken fountain with the traffic cone, a lot more like formalized seating, and increased accessibility. So there is funding for Kennard. It is going to be, moving forward, likely kind of the design contracting process will probably start later this year and move into next year. Obviously taking into account, the football season. And so if you go to the next one.
Marty, before we move forward on,
Yeah.
Is this the same thing that's on the orange tabs here? The next slide, is it the same thing?
What do you mean?
Like on the orange tabs that you have here on the prior slide,
Yeah.
is this the same thing on the next slide that you just showed broken down? Because I want to make sure that people can really grasp what's on there.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think that all of these are necessarily called out on the tabs, but there's obviously a lot of tabs.
Okay.
And those are really specific. Like there's one that says, rope lounger.
Mm-hmm.
Will that ultimately be a rope lounger or just another type of play space or seating? So some of them are a little more specific than others. And that will be something, there will be lots more engagement through the design phase. And as everyone knows, obviously, sometimes the cost of things is higher than when we estimated it. And so, prioritizing some of these maybe smaller, smaller elements, but the phase 0 is sort of meant to be the things that were like immediate needs, and kind of not negotiables really at all. And not that phase 1 are negotiables, but just that that if and when money is there, like that, those are phase 0, the things that need to get pushed forward. So some of these other things that are also priorities, the other recreational, so resurfacing the basketball courts, the bleachers, lots of the accessibility accommodations and the play spaces on the lower area. But the Department of Public Works will be the one to do this design in terms of where are the trash cans going, where are the lights going, that level of detail. So this is more conceptual, as a plan, and it will get a lot more detailed as the Department of Public Works starts that design process.
So can I just get clarification here on, I heard you say that funding is secured. Did I hear you say that funding is secured
Yep.
for phase 0 and for phase 1?
Yeah, it's meant to be Kennard as a whole. You know, so
Okay.
not chopping it up into different areas, but just, you know, across the board.
Okay, great. So I think with that, because we were planning during COVID and because there's a lot happening, one of the reasons why we have these meetings is because there's just been so much happening. I want to make sure that the community really has an opportunity to absorb the changes that are being proposed at Kennard. Is
Yeah.
it possible for you all to either deliver a printout of essentially the prior slide? And we can put that in the library. We can also make sure that the football team has that,
Yes.
that families surrounding the park have that. I think it's really important for people to understand the detail. And then also, is this still on Engage PGH? Or how
Yes.
can people participate if there are concerns? Because first of all, it's a major investment. So we're really excited about that. And our goal is for Kennard to be a regional point of attraction to bring not just a recreational amenity, but an economic development boost to the area. But we need to make sure that all of the detail of that park serves community. And then also that it really is what that the community is seeing what they think they gave to the city as wanting to see what's developed there.
Totally. Yes. I love that idea. Happy to, you know, send materials as well as, if you know when the next home game is, you know, or, you know, once, like I'm happy to set up a table and chat with folks, you know, and there will be, again, not to say we're starting from scratch because the plan was at the neighborhood level. You know, when the Department of Public Works starts this next phase, there will be, it's not starting from scratch, but definitely what you're saying of verifying that this is what people said and, you know, what they felt like they said, and that's what the city heard, and that everyone, feels like the right things are being prioritized in the right spaces.
Okay,
Definitely.
great. When can we expect to, I think, hear from, let me ask this question. When do we expect for the city to move forward on this? Can you be more clear on the timeline?
Being reasonable, you know, I think that the last quarter of the year, so I mean, essentially, you know, fall into the end of the year, you know, the project manager and the Department of Public Works will create the contract, you know, to solicit responses for this design work. And so that contract would be executed, you know, the start of 2024 and, you know, move through that year, which hopefully should line up then well with the budgeting process for 2025 to move it, you know, into construction.
Okay, so I'm hearing both business opportunities for business owners who are in the kind of architectural planning, landscape, construction spaces.
Yep.
Is that correct? Am I hearing that?
Yeah, and I can't say for sure, but I think this would definitely be like a full RFP, you know, because it is a larger and, you know, like could be a really signature project for a firm.
Absolutely. And so I think that there's that. And then I would also think that there are opportunities around, you know, kind of like the experience that people will get while they're there, kind of like a wayfinding, and those types of things. So we really want to make sure that we ensure that businesses from the Hill District and Black-owned businesses and other small businesses have an opportunity to compete for what's going to be a significant investment from the city. So we'll be looking to get that follow-up from you, Marty, as well as hopefully a much larger printed graph of the actual park and where you're planning to do those things based on input, because what we don't want is for people to for us, for the city to start the process. And
Yeah.
then the community is, well, why are we getting this? We should have had that. So we
Yeah.
really want to be thorough in that regard. It's just too significant of an investment to not do it, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And I think those things, probably the RFP can be starting to get developed as I'm, myself and maybe Rebecca's, team are out talking to folks to just verify that the scope of the RFP reflects, that this is an acceptable thing to build a scope off of.
Okay.
Definitely.
Sounds good. Thank you very much, Marty. We
Yeah,
appreciate
thank
your
you.
time. Are there any other questions or comments? If not, we're going to jump into Freedom Corner repair and updates. If Mr. Butts is able to join us, if not, I will do these updates. Thank you again, Marty.
Yeah, no problem. And I think there is an attendee named Harvey. I don't know if that's
Mhm.
him, but okay, yeah.
All righty. Welcome, Harvey.
Oh, how
How
are
are
you? Sorry.
you?
Yeah, I'm sitting in front of my house, enjoying the weather. I'll
That's
be really-
okay.
I try to do 20 things. I'll be really brief. We met
Okay,
with-
so really quickly, Harvey, we have a few slides. You may or may not be able to
Okay.
see that on your screen, but we're just going to click through them as you're talking,
Sure.
okay? So
Sure, okay.
please continue.
Okay, I'll look for the slides then. Okay, this is the condition of Freedom Corner after the accident. This is last summer. The incident happened in late June, so you see the disrepair, the cracked stone. We had to go through the process of measuring and ordering the stone, which took a 9-month delivery time. It took a little longer, but it was just delivered a month and a half ago. So we're ready to move it on site and get ready to start this project, which should take about 8 to 10 weeks. And that's an aerial showing the damage as well as other problems on site, such as the water damage and other issues that are going on with the site. Same thing. This is a little bit later. There's some repair done. I don't know, this pole was removed, but that's not really important. But this is showing condition. This is more recent with about, I guess, beginning of summer. The conditions of the things we're going to address. And the water damage, as well as the conditions of the sidewalk. We're going to talk to the contractor, the best way of getting this done. There's some decay of the foundation underneath. We're looking at how to fix that. But it's a work in progress. This is
Excellent.
the rendering of the proposed finished Freedom Corner after it's finished. And that's pretty much it. So yeah,
All right.
we started today. They're going to be on site a week from now. And it should take, like I said, 8 to 10 weeks to complete.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Harvey. The city of Pittsburgh is really the party who's paying for these repairs. Is that correct?
Yes, it's coming from operating fund from DPW, actually.
Okay.
Anything above and beyond, we're planning on trying to get capital or donations to do a phase 2 where we introduce artwork onto the kiosk, which we're going to remove.
Okay, thank you for that update. There was a commitment on the table by the Lower Hill developers, specifically, I believe Buccini Polling Group, who had committed to make an investment in a maintenance fund. This is for the benefit of the public. I do not know the status of that. Harvey, do you have any update on that?
No, I don't have any status on that now.
Okay. And then I also want to acknowledge that there's been lots of work happening to make this happen. So we want to thank you, Harvey, for your leadership. There's a committee that has been working diligently, inclusive of a number of community members. Councilman Lavelle's office has been playing point on this. So we definitely want to ensure that we recognize that that contribution as well. But at any rate, with that said, I want to thank you again, Mr. Butts, for making time to come to give us this update. I expect, based on what we talked about before, that most of the updates will be completed by the holidays. And
Yes.
so that's very, very exciting to hear It's such an important monument for our community.
We're expecting to have it finished right before Thanksgiving.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
Thank you. Take care.
You're welcome. All right, we are going to invite Jordan Smith from the Hill CDC to provide an update on the Center Avenue planning that's happening. Jordan?
Thank you so much, Marimba. Good evening, everyone. As Marimba said, my name is Jordan Smith, for those who are unfamiliar. I am Cultural Main Street Manager, and I am here to give you an update about the exciting work that we're doing for, as the slide here says, the great return of Center Avenue. So really, you know, we've kind of touched base on this update a little bit, a few different times, but one second, we've gotten to a space to where, you know, you've heard me say report a few different times, but really I kind of want to get away from that vocabulary and get to, like, you know, using it as a tool. All right, go ahead. Really as a tool. She has to go to the bathroom. Really is a tool. You know, we're pulling a lot of the information from the existing plans that exist in the community, along with some more updated conversation, right? Conversation with various different community organizations, public and private, philanthropic community, but most people who are having stake here in the Hill District community. And what the report, like I said, we're going to really use tool is going to be an opportunity to take some of those, what the community is deeming kind of priority, and taking those and going through and doing some actual activation. So a lot of folks wanted to talk about what specific things we're going to be doing. Then this report is going to be guiding the actual activation. So they're going to be spread across various different focus areas, such as food, culture and community, health and wellness, arts and culture. And in each of those specific areas, thank you, as the slides advance here, you can kind of see in those specific areas what activations or what specific programs are going to be going on. Now, what's really most important about all of these things is it's not really like one thing that was deemed by myself or any individual in particular at Hill CDC staff. This was worked on with Hill CDC staff, Yancey consultants, and the community. So these things that are being pulled out of all of our existing reports and plans that are deemed to be priority or most important are coming from addressing actual needs of the community. Now, you may see some things here that may be already existing, and it's not necessarily about replacing, but uplifting and really enhancing. So there are going to be community groups who are already championing certain work. And so those community groups are going to be working in collaboration with other organizations to further the existing work, or creating something new that is going to inspire permanence. You can go ahead and advance if you want. And again, so this kind of just goes into a little bit of detail of what I just talked about. You see the primary focus areas there in green, which I just spoke about. And above that, you know, one thing that's important is making sure that the community is continually being molded for everyone. So it's making sure that we're being inclusive of all generations. Now, there are going to be some programming geared to a specific demographic, while there will also be some that are geared to, as you see, an intergenerational mix. And each of those are broken down into 3 buckets, to which we have identified as opportunity for short-term, midterm, and long-term. So that would be the 4th row, which is in orange. You'll see short-term, 12 to 24 months, medium-term, 3 to 5 years, and then long-term are 5 years and beyond. And so this is kind of just an example of some of those priority items in which you'll see along. Now, again, we're focused on Center Avenue corridor, culture, commerce, and innovation. So you'll see a lot of these things happening directly across the corridor. So this is just an example of short term. Here's some midterm examples, and then we have some longer term examples on the next slide as well. Excellent. Now, again, you know, they're broken down into these term buckets you'll see in some of the shorter to midterms, those might be things that are actively already happening, or, you know, or the collaboration that is involved might be in such that we have an opportunity to uplift it more immediate versus a longer term. And now, again, just because one thing is shorter term versus longer term doesn't really dictate its permanence. It's just about its opportunity to actually execute and where on the timeline that is happening with the collaboration. You go, next slide. And so you'll see here, this has been pinpointed on exactly where a lot of these tentative locations. So some of these locations will happen in existing physical structure. Some of them will happen in vacant lots. And the ones that happen in the vacant lots are, like I just mentioned a little bit before, they're either a program or initiative or activation that fuses built environment with what we're doing specifically, or it could be in a place that is already slated for a specific focus area, excuse me. Or it could be to inspire permanence, right? We know you see a lot of in the wellness, the clinics and the health and wellness, the fitness and things like that. So these are the various degrees, and you'll just kind of see here on the map here where each of these are thought to be. And again, just kind of reiterating some of those focus areas that we talked about: food, innovation, wellness, social and community, and learning. Excellent. And so what you see here on the screen now, I spoke earlier about a lot of the stakeholder conversation informing a lot of this work. And this was a luncheon held by Lisa Yancey and her consultant group. And it was for the community, for the stakeholders, for the folks who we've had those series of grounding conversations in. This was an opportunity to actually designate as an individual or organization what work that you're already championing or what work that you would like to participate in going forward through collaboration. And I keep saying collaboration because the work is needed for collaboration. It's community-wide, so it's not just one or two individuals. And that's all my time. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jordan. Really excited about the near completion of the tool that has been created to advance our commercial corridor, our commercial, cultural, and innovation corridor. We think that Center Avenue is, going to be one of the best places to be in the entire region. And I can tell you that it is a subject of conversation nationally, how we are working on the redevelopment of this particular corridor in a way that honors the cultural legacy of the Hill District neighborhood. And we're really excited and proud about that. All right, so we are going to take any final questions or comments at this time. And then we want to also invite you to a ribbon cutting. So if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to raise your hand. But otherwise, we're going to go on ahead and wrap up. We want to thank our presenters for the diligence that they are doing to ensure that we can continue to come back on a bi-monthly basis to provide this update to the community. We know there's a lot of information here, but it's information that needs to be in the hands of the residents of the Hill District. And so that's, again, the point of these meetings. So when you see the bi-monthly plans meetings posted, you're welcome to come. We know that we generally advertise these out on our social media platforms after the meetings so that people can really sit with the information, but you're welcome to come in person as well, as some people have joined us here tonight. With that said, we have exciting news about this week, this Thursday. If you have not received an invitation, we want to make sure that you receive a personal invitation from both me, the Board of Directors of the Hill CDC, and staff to join us for an exciting event, which is the ribbon cutting for New Granada Square Apartments this Thursday at 11 a.m. So that'll be right on center at 2033, next slide, 2023 Center Avenue. And Hill CDC will be joined by our co-development partner, CHN Housing Partners, Mayor Gainey, Councilman Daniel Lavelle, and a range of other project partners and funders to celebrate the momentous occasion of officially recognizing the opening of the 40-unit housing development mixed with commercial on Center Avenue. The commercial will be open later, but the residential, this will be the formal grand opening and celebration of the New Granada Square Apartment. So come on out, have a good time. We'll have a reception that starts at noon, and then we'll wrap up. So let's get your weekend started early by celebrating with us on Thursday. All right, next slide. I already requested questions and answers. So having none, I do want to encourage everyone to be social with the Hill CDC. You can find us on social media platforms, YouTube, Twitter, also known as X, we haven't quite formally accepted that yet here, but we're going to try. Instagram, LinkedIn, and Facebook. You can also join our mailing list at hilldistrict.org/sign up. You do not want to miss the Hill District Weekend Roundup. If you want to be in the know in the Hill District, you got to sign up for the Hill District Weekend Roundup at hilldistrict.org/sign up, and follow us at My Hill District on all social media platforms, except for LinkedIn, where you want to search for Hill Community Development Corporation. With that, we're signing off. Thank you for your support and your engagement.